Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, welcome. My name is Rami. I am an incoming OBGYN resident as well as a former registered nurse. My content relates to all of that. So if you are new here, please click that red subscribe button to join the family. It means so much to me, and thank you so much for everyone who has been here this entire journey. Your encouragement, your words of kindness have just meant so much to me over the past 5 years of my channel. I cannot believe it has been that long. Today's video is going to be all about applying to OB-GYN as a medical student, as well as going over how ResidencyCAS was for me. I'm going to be going over a bunch of interview tips and different application components, including letters of recommendation, personal statements, basically just touching on all of those topics related to your application. So let's get started. With ResidencyCAS opening soon, maybe wondering how the experience was applying with ResidencyCAS and how the new signaling works. So I'm super excited to be talking about my experience and hopefully sharing some very helpful tips for you guys on your OB-GYN journey. I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into ResidencyCAS. And honestly, ResidencyCAS was so much easier for me to use compared to applying to medical school. I felt like it was super user-friendly. It didn't take much time at all. All I needed to do was just really have my stuff ready, my personal statement, have my letter writers ready to be submitting, and from then on, it was just super simple to use. So there's a personal information section where you put in all your personal information, your academic history, what schools you went to, and the supporting information was the bulk of the application, and that is where you indicate your experiences, your hobbies, you put in your personal statement, your publications, and your presentation. So this part takes the longest, but to me, it still took way less time than applying to medical school. Reason being is you can only add up to 12 total experiences. That includes research, whether you were an advocate for anything, any extracurriculars, work and teaching, mentoring, things like that. So basically all your experiences are only limited to 12. So you get to pick your top 12 experiences. You get to indicate your 3 most meaningful, but unlike applying for medical school, you don't have to type a paragraph specific to why it was most meaningful for you. You just start it. And the reason is for that is so that programs can see which is most meaningful to you and ask you questions related to that. And you get to talk about why it was most meaningful during your interviews. However, you don't have to write a whole paragraph and think of something different just for that specific experience, which saved me so much time in the long run. I want to quickly touch on my personal statement and how I created it. I first drafted off my old personal statement getting into medical school, but I realized that wasn't up to date and it wasn't really working with my journey, specifically as a nurse, going to medical school, becoming a doctor. There was so much more that I wanted to say. So the first thing I did was take it to the right spot at my school and just have them critique it. I just told my story, I drafted up a story, and I had them critique it and see how it made them feel and things that I could work on the statement. So what I did was take it home after that first very rough draft, and I added in my story. I started with a very memorable story as a labor and delivery nurse. Briefly talked about why I went to medical school, become a doctor, and how much I've changed throughout medical school and what I've learned from medical school and why I want to be an OB-GYN. So your main focus is on why you want to be an OB-GYN, and your experiences through med school will help you write this personal statement to make it your own and make it very well thoughtful and crafted. And my main tip for writing your personal statement is to show it to as many people as possible. I would show it to people that I was doing a sub-I with, other medical students, see how it made them feel, see if the flow worked. Have many people read it, as well as your OB-GYN advisors. So they are super important. They probably have done some interviewing themselves and went through applications themselves. So I would definitely make them look at it. Probably my number one helpful tip, as they are the most specific people who will help you. Then you get to pick what programs you want to apply to. You get to go through all of them. There is a different website on each program where it takes you to where the program details are, which is really neat. You get to pick your programs you want, which programs you want to signal. And then when it comes time to submitting your application, you just hit submit and you just go from there. Keep in mind that whenever you do submit, which for me, it was the end of September, All the programs won't see it until a few days after. I think it was a 3 to 5 day period, before it's released to all the programs. That being said, it does not benefit you to apply early on in August or whenever it's open. You can literally submit the last day and the last hour, and the programs will get it the exact same time, whether you submitted the very last hour or very early on. They do not know the difference, so keep that in mind. This was really beneficial to me because it let me really work on my application and take my time, make sure all my letter writers had ample time to submit their letter, and just go over my personal statement over and over and over and make sure that it was perfect to a T before submitting to all the programs. I was also doing a lot of aways during this time, and I also had my second baby, so having this extra time was just so beneficial and so helpful. Moving on to signaling. For OB, we get 3 gold signals and 15 silver signals. That is a total of 18 total signals. So I attended the ACOG district meeting that year, and different program directors were speaking during different lectures and presentations. I also attended some online webinars going over ResidencyCAS and signaling and things like that, which was really beneficial. Basically, we were told that if a program isn't signaled, they are very unlikely to send you an interview. This is because you have 18 total signals. That is a lot of signals. So if a program is getting applied to, that means they're number 19, 20, 21, or so on your list, which means they don't feel as important. However, that being said, I do have different colleagues and friends who applied OB-GYN, and they still got interviews to places that they did not signal. These programs, however, were newer, so they just either started a year or so ago. They're a program that's not heavily applied to, so they do send out interviews to people who do not signal them. However, there are still programs that are not newer and will still send you a signal. So there's a big Excel sheet where medical students put in all the info about different programs. I'm gonna link that somewhere below. I think I just Googled it or Googled it on Reddit, and that Excel sheet was super helpful in regards to how the program is, whether they're toxic or not, how the residents are, and things like that. Also update it if they do get an interview to that program and how many interviews they sent out. Just take a look at it or Google it if I can't find it, because every year it changes. It's like a new link. So I don't know if the link is out currently, and as time goes on, every year will be different. I also want to quickly touch on the gold and silver signals as well as location. So there is no geographical preference that you can do anymore in ResidencyCAS, where you just apply to a specific location only. You can apply wherever you want. So for me, what was most important for me was coming back home to my family. You guys know that. We moved to Houston, which was 4 to 5 hours away from my family, and it was just us. So we need help, and I wanted to come back home so bad. That was my main goal. Mine, of course, was geographical preference, as well as a program that wasn't toxic. That was super important for me, to not be yelled at or crying in the corner that I've seen at some programs. I did not want that for myself. Those are my top 2 things, and honestly, I was told by many different residents that all training is pretty standard. The accreditation for each residency program makes sure you maintain a specific amount of numbers, how many C-sections you do, vaginal delivery, surgeries, things like that. So every program has to have similar set standards. So wherever you train isn't that important. And that's what I was told by so many residents, which I felt like was pretty motivational because I wasn't aspiring to hit the top residency program. I just wanted to come back home, be with my kids, be with my family, have a great, non-toxic, supportive environment where I feel like I can just ask any question and not feel like I'm asking a dumb question. That being said, I sent my 3 gold signals to the top programs that I was interested in back at home. I only heard from 2 of the gold signals and 1 just ghosted me. So ghosting is pretty common actually in the interview world, which I didn't really know until I applied. Many programs will just ghost you. They won't even reject you. So I applied to 20 programs and I got interviews from 10 of them. 18 I applied to using my signals. 1 I didn't have to signal because it was my sub-I location and they didn't require you signaling them. And 1 was just like a new program that I was interested in that I didn't have enough signals for. So I only heard back from 2 out of the 3 golds, and I only heard back from 7 of the 15 silver signals. 1 silver responded that they already hit their interview slot limit, and the rest just ghosted me. To this day, I've never heard anything from these programs. So don't fret if you don't hear anything. It's more common than you think that programs will just not respond to you at all. I know many people that applied to 30 or 40 or 50 programs, but hearing that they may not interview me anyway just kept my number really low. I wasn't the highest competitive applicant with my step 2 score or anything like that. So I felt comfortable applying to just 20, but if you feel like you need to apply to more, or if you have lower scores, apply to as many as possible. Keep in mind this doesn't get expensive, but if you are really set on applying to OB-GYN, definitely look into newer programs. I want to talk about sub-Is. So sub-Is may not require signals, so always check with your program director to see if a signal is required or not. So I did one sub-I, which was my home sub-I, and I also did one away rotation at a program that I was interested in that was close to my family. And the away rotation that I did require a signal, whereas the one back home did not. So make sure you check with the program director if you are doing sub-I/away rotations and see if you need to signal them or not, because it may save you a signal to apply somewhere else. So going back to choosing your programs, mine was definitely about location, but make sure that it fits your mission, your values, and make sure that the vibes check. I will be talking more about that in my interview section, but just write down your top 3 things you're looking for in a program, and then go through the list on ResidencyCAS that talks about the programs and see which ones you're most interested in to build your list that way. So going into interview prep, have your first mock interview before you even start interviewing with your OB-GYN advisor. They've probably interviewed lots of people before. Maybe they were a program director or they're a faculty member at a big residency program, so they will give you the best advice on what to say, what interested them, what not to say during your mock interview. I felt like this was the most helpful thing because it helped get rid of interview jitters before my interview, and it just gave me good, solid advice before going into the interview. So try to mock interview with as many OB-GYN advisors or faculty as you can, or as many faculty that aren't OB-GYN as much as you can, that may have been program directors or they've interviewed before. That will be super helpful in preparing for your interview. I felt like interviews were super fun in the beginning, but as time went on, it got a little tedious and you can get a little burned out from interviews because they last for hours. They invite you to a social the night before, or it could be like a week before, depending on when they have their social and your interview timing. But you go to a social, you meet the residents from 1 to 3 hours, and then the next day or next week, you go into the interview that could be anywhere from 4 to 8 hours long. So it could take up your entire day. I really enjoyed interviews. It really helped me know a program, especially since they're hours and hours away and I didn't have an opportunity to do an away with them. But my number 1 tip is to keep a notebook handy for all your interviews you attend, because all these interviews can blur together and you'll forget specific information. So I literally just had a notebook. I wrote down the program name and I just wrote down everything that the resident said, the interviewer said that made me like the program, maybe some red flags that I heard about the program. I would write that down. I'll write all about the logistics. Is there free parking? Is there free food? Is there a Starbucks there? As well as their numbers. Are the residents hitting their numbers on time? Are they seeking out extra time to go look for their numbers? What is intern year like? Are we going to get a boot camp? Or are we just thrown in there? So there was just lots of different things that I asked. I asked the same set of questions during my socials and my interviews to get me to really know the program, and I just wrote it down each time. So have a notebook handy. My main tip is to go in with a theme for them to remember you. So this is super important because they interview hundreds of applicants, or maybe they interview 50 applicants that year, but you need to stand out. So of course for me, my theme was being a labor and delivery nurse, which is super unique. Not many nurses even go to medical school, but being a labor and delivery OB-GYN nurse was just such a strength in my application that so many people wanted to ask about it. You want them to come across your application later on and be like, oh, that was a labor and delivery nurse. Or, oh, that was the medical student that was a really good leader in their program and they started X, Y, and Z program at their school, or they started this club to help their community. Or this is the student that was an advocate. They advocated for their patients, they did X, Y, and Z and went above and beyond. You want a theme for yourself, for them to remember you. And try as much as you can to center your answers around this theme. If you're talking one thing about an advocacy where you advocated for a patient, and then the next you talked about how you helped your grandma, and the next you talked about conflict at work, it's going to be mixed up with a bunch of other applicants and your theme may be lost. So I recommend sticking to that theme as much as possible. So you're not going to really talk about your theme during the socials. The socials are a lot of the residents just speaking and talking. There are times where I just listened and let other people ask questions. I would throw in a question or two every single time though. Or they break out into mini rooms. It's just like you and another applicant or having you ask question after question. So be prepared to ask a lot of questions because you don't want to be the one where you're just like, no, I have no questions. Even if you're not interested in that program, the social is such a big part of your interview, even though they say it's not. Trust me, the residents will literally say, oh, this is just a vibe check. This is so chill. This is not part of your interview. Ask whatever you want. Don't ask whatever you want. Don't ask about, oh, is your program toxic or things like that. Try to phrase it in ways where you're like, how do residents support each other? Or how do your faculty members support you? I always asked about, what are your numbers? What are the logistics? What do you guys like to do in that city or town for fun? Do you guys have wellness activities that you guys do together as residents? And I just asked more chill, low-key questions to get to know the residents more, knowing a little bit more about their program culture. That was my main goal going into socials. For my actual interviews, I always had the same set of questions. I always made sure to research who is going to interview me. They will send you out a list of the faculty members who's going to interview you. Made sure to look up every single person, what their interests were, if it was there, what they help with, because sometimes it would just be like a PhD research person who helps the residents find research. So I would ask them research specific questions. They're not going to really introduce themselves during these interviews. They're not going to say, hi, I'm Dr. Smith and I help the residents with research. It's up to you to know about the people that you're going to interview with. Of course, you're going to interview with a program director. So I had specific questions specifically for the program director, as well as the chair of the program. If you're going to interview with a resident, that's going to be known. Have specific questions ready the day before you go. One thing I tried to do is end my questions on a positive note. So for example, I would ask the program director or chair, this could be asked to anyone, what are you currently working on that you're most excited about? So it's going to talk about an upcoming change that makes them happy. I've even asked program directors, what has been your most favorite day at work? Or what is your go-to OR playlist? Depends on their vibes, but I would just try to always end on a positive note. A good thing to also ask the residents are, what is a change that you guys requested that your faculty members implemented into the program? So you get to see whether the faculty is open to change from the residents and open to resident feedback. So that was also a really good question that I asked the residents. Another thing you have to know is your application. So look up your ResidencyCAS application before the interview season starts, and you will be good to go to talk about yourself. I started filling out some of this stuff months before I actually submitted. Sometimes I forgot what I put down. But the biggest thing to know that you have to keep in mind is your research. They will ask you about your research time and time again. Research heavy programs will ask you more research questions than places that aren't into research as much. Sometimes they would just ask me about my publication. They would say, oh, so what did you learn from it? Or what did you like from it? Or what was it about? Sometimes I don't even read what I did, but they'll read that I did a publication. So they would ask me about that publication a lot, and I had to talk about it a bit. But the research heavy places really asked about my research. I was even thrown off guard at one point because one program asked me specifically, what research database did I use to collect this information and collect the data for this research project I did? And I just threw a blank. I work with so many data sets and databases that I just could not for the life of me think of the name of this. It ended up being totally okay in the end. I am someone that always wants to be prepared. I definitely have my research memorized to a T where I can just talk about it. The biggest thing for your interview day is to have 4 to 5 unique stories that you can talk about, that you can change or mix up depending on what they're asking you. So your top 5 stories that you have, and make sure they're super memorable. So I had a story where I took care of a patient for a whole month during my whole NICU rotation and really bonded with them, and they had a very specific disease that I mentioned, and this story was super memorable and they really liked that story. So I used it for a time that was a tough time, a time of conflict, happy time. I use that for different questions and just changed it a little bit depending on what they were asking. Another scenario is when I was a new grad nurse and I helped a patient go to the OR within minutes. Their baby was coming out prematurely, so I talked about that, where if they asked me, name a time you were a leader, or name a time you were nervous, or name a time that you really helped the unit or helped your team out, I would just use that same story and just change it minutely depending on what they were asking me. But I always went back to their question and ended on a positive note. I would briefly just say what happened, what I learned from it, and how I hope to use that experience as a future doctor. Definitely have those stories in mind and don't memorize these stories. If you memorize them and try to say everything word for word, you're gonna mess up and it won't sound authentic. Just have the story in mind and be ready to change it according to their question, and that will help you greatly. Next, I want to talk about your background. Your background is actually super important. There was many applicants that I actually saw that used the blur or a little fake desk background or something like that. I wouldn't use that just because it doesn't seem as professional. You really want to make it seem like you're not hiding anything. So there was actually times where I saw applicants that had a messy background. They're in their room and their bed was not made, and I was like, what is happening here? Sometimes they use their kitchen and there's like a bunch of food in the background, bags that they didn't throw away, which is crazy, but they may have just forgotten. They may have been so nervous that they just forgot to clean up a bit behind them. Or maybe they woke up late, you never know, but just keep your background neat and tidy and professional. What I did was I had my desk in the background and I had a little bookshelf on my desk, a little white bookshelf that I put a little plant, little trinkets. A tip that I used from whenever I applied to medical school is have something in their color. So sometimes their school color, if they're attached to a school, would be red. So I'd put like a little red trinket in the background. I just kept my background the same, and it was just the same setup throughout interview season. So I can just wake up, put my clothes on, close the door, and just have my background already ready. Most of the time, sometimes people just use like a white background, just like their wall, which is okay, but I just wanted to stand out a bit more as an applicant, so that's why I used something that would help them remember me. For my clothing, I wore the exact same interview clothing that I wore to all of my interviews as a nurse for medical school. So I used the same outfit because it made me feel confident and comfortable, and I was just so used to that outfit, I knew nothing could go wrong. So it's kind of like my lucky go-to outfit. Like a button up with a jacket, which is probably not as modern. You can just use like a regular dress shirt and a professional jacket on top. But I just kept my button up that I used for so many years just to keep me confident. I wore comfy PJ pants on the bottom because the hours do get long. You're sitting there for a long time. It gets hot. I made sure to sit in front of natural lighting. So right now I'm not sitting in front of natural lighting, but I do have a ring light. So I would check my lighting with my computer app or FaceTime or something like that before my interview started, and I would just make sure the lighting looked really good. Residents did comment saying like, oh my gosh, you look like an angel right now. And people would just say my lighting is so good. Like they would just be like, your lighting is so good right now. And that's because I use natural light plus a ring light. Try to have that if you can. So I want to talk about post-interview communication. So right now, ACOG is trying to do away with post-interview communication, which is emailing the people that you interviewed with saying thank you, just to keep it more fair for all the applicants. So there were some programs that told us specifically after the interview was over in their closing remarks, they would say, don't send any post-interview communication. And for those programs, I didn't send anything because they explicitly said it during the interview. However, if they said something like, you guys don't need to send any post-interview communication, we're gonna make our rank list right after this meeting, so no worries about sending it. If it was more up in the air, you could or couldn't, I would just go ahead and send a post-interview email just thanking them for the experience. And if they didn't say anything at all about it, I would most definitely send them a thank you letter. And I had the same template for every single program that I interviewed at. I would just say the same things. Thank you so much for letting me interview. I liked this aspect of your program, and I'll just edit it depending on the program that I interviewed at and how I can see myself there as a future resident. I think that some places, especially if the program director is a little more old school, I would send them a thank you email. My final tips are to be confident. I have heard such great positive remarks from program directors after I interviewed them, or even during my interview. They would literally say, "We hope to see you here. We can see you at our program," which I just loved hearing that feedback from them. Remember your purpose and why you want to be an OB-GYN and how you're going to be a great OB-GYN and benefit from their program. They really want to see someone who is confident and they can see do well at their program, and they're willing to learn, they're eager to learn. So try to do that and show what makes you unique and what brings you to the program. If you guys have any questions at all, please leave me a comment down below and I would love to answer it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!